Hi, folks. Welcome back to another episode of Open Up the Workforce. I'm your host, Ahva Sadeghi, and we have a special episode in store for you today. I'm joined by David Hawthorne, Chief People Officer of Pacific Bells. And yes, you definitely know what Pacific Bells is if you've ever been to Taco Bell. That's why I'm so excited, because I've definitely frequented your restaurants, and so many of my good friends and family has as well. David, you began your journey at Pacific Bells over 20 years as an HR manager when it was a franchisee of only 65 Taco Bell restaurants in 3 states. And that has changed quite a bit. You scaled incredibly. Now you lead all the HR and people functions for over 435 locations across 10 different brands in 19 states. We love to hear more about your career journey. Can you tell us more about your story?
Happy to, Ahva. Thanks for having me on. I, again, started as an HR manager. I oversaw HR and employee relations and workers' comp and those fun things for our Ohio group of restaurants at the time. And our CEO is always in a growth mode. And within months of me joining the company, we acquired another 15 restaurants and grew to 80 with about 1,500 employees at that time. And over the years, we've just continued to grow and add, and I've continued to work up from HR manager to director to VP. And then about 9 years ago, almost 10 years ago now, I took over as Chief People Officer for the organization. And we grew from a meager department of 3 HR folks to about 28 people on my team now, overseeing all sorts of stuff around the country, HR and people related. So it's been a fantastic journey. And when everybody asked me, how do you stay 20 plus years at the same company? And I said, for me, it's really not the same company. We're different every year. We've grown from 1,200 to over 12,000 employees. And that's been a consistent process that has just made it very exciting and very challenging, always doing something different.
It's so incredible to hear you say that, especially because at Symba and the startup world, we are a different company almost every month, or growing and scaling. And so that's such an interesting perspective. And that's one of the reasons I really admire you so much too, David, is how you've been able to lead change over time, because it's not easy. Is there anything that really got you interested into HR, and really like a moment in your early stages of your development career that got you excited about this world and this work?
Interestingly enough, I sort of started my career after college as an assistant manager with Taco Bell, working for Taco Bell Corporation. I was an assistant manager for about 6 months before I got promoted to a general manager. And really, especially at the general manager level, you realize the impact that you have on people, the impact you have on their careers, their lives, their families' lives. It's just amazing. And so that, to me, was the most incredible part of being a manager or leader, was the impact that you have on others. And so as I continued to grow in the organization, I really kind of migrated toward leadership development, training and development, recruiting. And before I knew it, I wound up in HR. I joke with people all the time that very few people go to school to say, I want to be in HR, but you wind up in it. And that was certainly my case. And so I think that has had the biggest impact on me wanting to be in human resources, being able to help people.
That's so powerful, especially when you think about career mobility and just the opportunities that are afforded within Pacific Bells, and how that transition happens so naturally. I totally hear you when you say that you don't go to school and you say you want to study HR. I mean, there are programs now that are being developed, in quite a few like graduate programs, but it's always interesting to hear how people move into this space. And as my background, I studied in economics and human rights, and that was quite a shift into this space. But I do feel like so much of this work is helping people, is about economic opportunity, is about really making sure that they have a fair chance. And part of that is really interesting when we study how many different types of folks and workers, and the scope and breadth of what you manage and lead as a Chief People Officer at Pacific Bell. So can you break that up for our audience, just to give us a taste of kind of how you kind of oversee all these different teams and workers part of your organization?
Absolutely. The very challenging part of working for our company is we're not just Taco Bells. We have Buffalo Wild Wings, we have European Wax Centers, we have VO Med Spa, we have, so many things to name, construction company. We have a brewery, Ahva Brewing in Portland, Oregon. And we have just a ton of different businesses that we operate. And so as an HR person, being able to manage all the processes and people and assist with the culture development of those organizations, very interesting and challenging because they're all very different. It's a very different experience to go to a Taco Bell versus a Buffalo Wild Wings. And the people need to understand that. And as an HR professional, as you're helping these folks, you've got to understand that too. So we've gone through lots of migration with our team. We've got a team of about 8 people who are what we call HR business partners and a director of HR who work out in the field. They are truly the restaurant and sports bar support. So when an employee has a question, they need something HR related, they're reaching out to one of our HR business partners. And these HR business partners, many of them oversee HR for multiple brands and having to change hats, if you will, to, okay, this culture is a little different. We don't call them employees at this company. We call them team members. We call them associates at this company. Little things like that even make a difference in building that. So really getting the HR business partners was a critical foundation to what we support from an employee relations, development, mentoring, and support roles for the group. Beyond that, my team also oversees risk management from the organization. So when you think about safety and security, unfortunately, restaurants can be targets for robbery and burglary. And how do we protect our assets and our people from those events when they happen? So we've got a team of 3 very dedicated folks on the risk management team that oversee that and our insurance and workers' comp and all the things that go along with safety and security. And obviously, benefits are a huge part of HR and the total rewards piece, the health benefits, retirement benefits, all the other pieces that happen there. So we've got a team that manages those processes and keeps up with everything there. And then in our organization, and I find it's about 50-50 in companies, but in our organization, payroll is an HR function. In many organizations, it's an accounting function, but in ours, it's a payroll function. So paying 12,000 plus people on 3 different pay cycles out of 10 different companies is a very challenging prospect. So we have a fantastic team of payroll professionals led by a director of payroll that makes sure that everybody gets paid correctly and all of their 401k contributions get to their accounts and all those fun things that have to happen with that. So, and then just because of my time with the company, I sort of inherited managing our support center locations. So we've got an office manager and executive assistant that supports me, and the executives that also reports to me. So a very diverse group in our HR team, but they all work very well together. And it happened so long now, we're all used to it.
Wow. My head is spinning. I'm like, I hope you have a moment, because it sounds like you have like so many different jobs at once. When you say the risk factors, you say the payroll. I mean, there's just so many different facets that you just brought up that are really all within their own world, and so many different functions that are essential, right? Payroll is essential, right? Is the foundation of how you operate a business. And I think it was interesting that you brought up, I see you mentioned Buffalo Wild Wings, but also the European wax stores and how much a variety some of those. Are there any kind of key learnings that you've had just as maybe acquisitions have happened to really think about how do you let an entity keep who they are, but be absorbed into the larger organization when you think about maybe cultural and practice? Because it sounds like you do enable organizations to keep some element of their identity and who they are, which is fantastic and really not easy to do.
Not easy to do at all. It's probably one of the more challenging things that we do is those acquisitions. We've grown from 65 when I joined the company in 2002 to over 435 today. And some of that has been very what we call organic growth. We'll go build a restaurant somewhere and open it up and begin operating it. And we do several of those a year. But a lot of our rapid growth has come through acquisition. And that could be a 3-store acquisition. It could be a 60-store acquisition. And those are all very different. And the one thing that we learned early on in the acquisition process is we're not perfect. We think we do a great job at a lot of stuff, but we're not perfect. So there are very likely organizations out there doing something better in some facets than we're doing. And so what we want to be able to do when we have an acquisition is go in and take a look and say, how do you do this? Why do you do this? How does it work for you? What are your success stories with it? And then we share the same sort of things. At the end of the day, we're the acquiring company. We're the lead in that process. And you've got to be open to be able to say, wow, we just bought these 50 restaurants in California and they do this thing much better than we do. Let's learn how they do it so we can apply it across the other 400 locations that we have, instead of just kind of going in and saying, hey, we know what we're doing here. We're going to change what you do. We did that early on in a couple of acquisitions and learned very quickly, boy, we shouldn't have done that. So that's probably been the biggest thing. And every acquisition is different. Every acquisition has just a different culture almost, even though we're all Taco Bells or Buffalo Wild Wings or whatever we're acquiring. It's still a different culture. People lead, they have different priorities, they lead differently. So how do we look at what they're doing, compare that to what we're doing and say, hey, what can we take that will make us a better organization overall? Even if it means that we leave something that we've done for years behind to say, hey, that doesn't work as well as what they do. Let's change. So that's been fun.
That's incredible. And that's really inspiring to hear that you take that mentality with you, because as people make their own organizations, or even we just think about these different franchisees. We were talking about this earlier while we were prepping for this, and you had mentioned even in a different location, right, can have a very different culture. And this country, the United States, is so big, right? When we think about the culture, I'm originally from Texas. The culture of Texas to where I'm living now in California is just vastly different in so many respects. And so it's really fantastic that you're taking that whole perspective. Any thoughts there just on the range of even the same type of store or concept in different locations? Anything that you've been learning there?
It's amazing. And for us, we have preached for a long time that the most important position in our company is that of the general manager. When you look at how, whether it's a restaurant or a retail location or a brewery, whatever it is, when you look at how it operates, the general manager really sets the tone and the culture for those four walls and the people that work inside those four walls. And you may have Taco Bells that are 5 miles apart that operate the same. You get the same tacos and the same bean burritos, but the people are treated differently, or the people behave differently because of the leadership in that restaurant, because of the general manager. And so, what we have to do is really make sure that culture in every single location aligns with what we want our values to be and how we want to live those. And that becomes challenging. So when you look at an acquisition that has its own sort of broad culture, what I'll call the macro culture, every restaurant has its own microculture. And how do you ensure that microculture fits into what you're doing as an organization, where you want to go and how you want to be viewed and how you want to lead?
That's really insightful. And I love that you said that the general manager role is so important and critical. If we could just spend a few minutes talking about that, I'd love to understand, how do you set up the general manager for success to really empower them? Because it sounds like they have a lot of responsibility that they need to take ownership of.
They do. I mean, when you look at a restaurant, it can be a $1, $2, $5, $7 million a year business that's operated. And especially when you look at our Taco Bells, I started at Taco Bell as an assistant manager right out of college with no experience really in restaurants, and grew into a chief people officer at a company. When you look at restaurants, you see a lot of people that, hey, I started working for Taco Bell when I was 16 years old. It's kind of a weekend job when I was in school. And I loved it. I loved working with people. I loved the interaction with the guests. I loved making the food, running the drive-thru, whatever those things are. And they stay in it. And they learn to be a shift leader. They learn to be an assistant manager, then a general manager. And those people really kind of, I'll say, have it the best when it comes to being able to get to fairly rapid success in a restaurant, because they know the systems and processes. They know the culture. They know the expectations, and they kind of move into it. And the restaurant industry overall, Taco Bell especially, has done a fantastic job of providing those opportunities for people. So we are constantly assessing our shift leaders, assistant managers. We have great training tools from Taco Bell Corporation. We have some other training tools that we leverage to be able to help people not only be the best assistant manager they can be when they're an assistant manager, but preparing them to be a general manager down the road, because that's going to happen. The great thing about growing as much as we have grown is there is always an opportunity for somebody to move up to the next level. And we're constantly talking with our teams about that. One of the great stories that we're able to share is our own CEO. He started working for Taco Bell back in the day when we used to fry everything in the restaurants. He fried taco shells every day and worked his way into management, into multi-unit management and franchise consulting, met a franchisee that they partnered together and opened their first restaurant outside of Portland. And now he's one of the 11 largest franchises in the country with what he's done. And we have lots of stories like that throughout. So being able to really set the expectations for what's needed in the role, provide the training for people to hit those expectations, and then communicating what the opportunities are. Hey, we've got general manager opportunities all the time. We've got district manager, area coach opportunities. We've got directors of operations. Both our current president of our Taco Bell brand as well as our former president of our Taco Bell brand both grew up in restaurants, starting as assistant managers, and now they run the entire brand under our franchisee. So phenomenal stories, phenomenal opportunities, and really a lot of training and development goes into that to get people ready for the next level.
That paints such a powerful picture. And I think back to my own experience. I was a server at Topgolf, and I'm not sure if I shared that with you before, David, but it was such a powerful experience for me to go through that whole training. And it was a lot about team support and how we support. It's like we have our own tables, but how do we support each other with whether it's bringing waters out to other people's table. And so how it really supports the team effort. And I love the experience. It was also one of the hardest experiences, and my body was tired. It was not easy. And I oftentimes wouldn't get my shifts till like the week before. So I kind of had no idea what my schedule would look like. So there were some challenges, but it was a really profound experience that I had, and I really appreciate it. I think everyone should have some sort of experience to understand this world and why it comes with its own challenges in so many ways. And I know that this, more than many of our listeners, but turnover in the restaurant industry is very high. And this is just the industry itself. And I'd love to understand, how are you thinking about this at Pacific Bells and all the range of restaurants you have to really retain employees and map out succession plans?
And I think there's a lot that goes into that. And when you talk about turnover being high, and for your listeners' benefit, our turnover in 2023 was 180% at the team member level. So it's incredibly high. Some of that is just what I call natural organic turnover. You've got high school kids that come work for you during the summer, and then they leave. They go to college kids that work for you while they're in school away from home, and then they leave to go get a job in their course of study or whatever that is. Those sorts of things happen. You have people that pick up these jobs as second incomes and part-time jobs. And so they are not as vested in it as those folks that grow up to be general managers and CEOs in this organization, right? So you've got that big group. When we look at what I like to call the controllable turnover, how do we prevent the people who have been in this industry for a long time, they enjoy working in the restaurant industry, but they left us for some reason? What does that look like? And at the end of the day, a lot of it comes down to there's a lot of competition in the restaurant industry. It's easy to walk down the street and make 25 cents an hour or 50 cents an hour more than somebody else is paying. And the question I always ask people when I hear that, boy, I went to go work at McDonald's because they paid 50 cents more an hour. And my first question is, how did you know? What made you go look at McDonald's to see if they were paying more? And in many cases, we find out, hey, my manager was toxic. And those happen, right? With 435 locations, 435 microcultures, we're bound to have some that aren't the greatest. And so how do we go rectify those? How do we either go help that manager become a better leader, or how do we replace that manager because they may not be the right leader for our organization at all, and do that? So that becomes a critical piece. In many cases, a lot of the reason people leave is, hey, I want to grow with an organization and I don't see an opportunity for advancement here. And that's probably the most disappointing for me, because we have so many opportunities that it just means that we failed to communicate what those opportunities were for people. And everybody has the opportunity to move up in an organization like this one. There's always turnover, so there's always going to be openings that come up naturally. And we're a growing company. We've grown every single year that I've been with the company. We've grown. So that creates opportunities as well. So for me, that becomes very disappointing. So how do we then instill in our managers and our district managers and area coaches to say, how do we communicate to people that if they want to be a general manager, there's a path, and it's a very well-defined path. These are the training things we need you to do. These are the types of behaviors and experiences we want you to display and have in order to reach that next level. And so part of the process that we go through, and we've done this for, probably 15 years now, is what we call bench planning. And bench planning for us happens multiple times every month. And it'll start with a general manager meeting with their area coach or district manager to be able to say, hey, these are the 25 people in my building. Of those 25 people, I have 5 people that I think could be promotable to the next level, whether that's a team member to a shift leader or a shift leader to an assistant manager or an assistant manager to a GM. These are the people I think are promotable. This is a timeline I think they could be promoted within. And these are the skill sets or leadership opportunities that they need development in or training in order to get there. We then roll that up at the next level to the directors of operations, where the area coaches then say, hey, I've got 3 general managers in my span of 7 stores that have the potential to move up. And these are the things that they need. And that rolls all the way up to region vice presidents. And there's an HR business partner or a director of HR involved in many of those conversations as well, so that we get a pulse on, hey, we've got at any given time in the organization, we may have 30 people who are promotable to GM. And what are we doing to make sure that they get there? So for us, it's a lot about controlling turnover through getting rid of the bad leadership, through training and development, ensuring people understand the opportunities they have to grow with the company, because a lot of people want to grow. Everybody wants to grow. A lot of people want to grow up that corporate ladder, and we have those opportunities. And we even have opportunities for people that I don't want to be a district manager. I'd love being a general manager, but I want to be the best general manager I can be. And so what are some of the opportunities that we provide for those folks in order to have them help mentor other general managers, have them train new managers that come into the system, and those sorts of things. There are lots of things we do around those things, around those topics, to help people find a way to stay with our organization, because we have places for them to be. And then in some cases, there are just bad things that happen. And unfortunately, HR usually becomes the police officer in those certain situations. And that's unfortunately the reputation that a lot of HR folks have is, hey, boy, I don't want to go see HR. It's like going to the principal's office. But sometimes we have to be the principal. We have to take the students in and say, hey, you did a bad thing. And there are consequences for that. Let's talk about what those look like. But we have to be very quick in handling those things when they come up, because that's also part of the culture of the organization. How quickly do we respond when something bad happens? Because we're just human beings. Something bad is going to happen. People are going to make mistakes. You're going to do something they shouldn't have done. How quickly does the company go in to resolve that? I think is also critical for us. So there are lots of pieces that go into that. Hiring the right people and setting the expectations and providing the training and development, and then motivating them to succeed and setting the environment for them to be able to be motivated to succeed.
I think it's a great picture. And there are a few things that you mentioned that I really sincerely appreciate. I think one of them was when you called it bench planning. And every time I talk about really talent development and career planning, I always go back to sports. And I think about how in sports you invest in cultivating talent. If you don't have a lot of money, you might be not able to buy that talent, but you need to nurture and build your own pipeline. So it sounds really clear how you've talked about this. And I also appreciate how you talked about building up leaders and giving them the opportunity to communicate what opportunities are available. I know you do have quite a few impressive initiatives like the Live Moss Scholarship and a lot of different ways that you're giving back to those that are part of your community, your employees. So it's very clear. I'm inspired by that work. And one thing I did want to ask you as well, when we think about controlling turnover and think about the scale and the massiveness of your operations, is how much have you been able to incorporate technology into some of the activities that you're doing?
For us, there's kind of a multi-layered approach to that. For us, a lot of technology happens either from our franchisors, where they're putting in new point of sale systems, new register systems that operate more smoothly. You see, if you've been to Taco Bell recently, you've seen a kiosk in the dining room where you can go place your own order at a kiosk. And if you're one of the folks these days that don't like to have human interaction, okay, great. There's a computer I can go talk to and tell it I want 3 tacos with extra ground beef, whatever that is. So those have been great to help our processes, to help make it easier on our team members inside the building to do their jobs, more efficiently. Lots of technological improvements in the kitchen. How do we prepare and heat and hold product better for our guest satisfaction as well as for easy use by the employees? I think from the HR perspective, some of the key initiatives that we've had recently have really been allowing our employees a holistic view into their whole employment cycle with the organization. And so one of the things we've recently done is we've migrated our entire human capital management over to ADP. We haven't picked ADP out of a bunch of groups, but there are a lot of companies that do a great job with this, but really being able to, with 1 or 2 apps, going in and seeing, hey, I can see my last pay stub. I can get an electronic copy of my W-2. I can see what my 401k balance is. I can sign up for benefits in the app. All the things that typically happened in HR. Gosh, I remember years ago having to mail out these big, thick 2-inch envelopes to people when it was time for benefits enrollment. And knowing that nobody read through that stuff. Nobody read through 20 pages of stuff on the health insurance. Now you can go on a website that you have a chat bot using some AI that runs you through, hey, these are the different benefit options you have. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Let's find the one that's best for you. And helping people understand what those things are, how much they cost, what the benefits of those benefits are, and how they can leverage those. And so that's a new initiative for us. We've just officially launched within the last month. So it's too early for me to tell you yet that it's been great, but we have very high expectations and high hopes that it's going to be a wonderful way for us to communicate better with people about total comp, and then making the administration of employment that much easier, right? Am I waiting in the mail for a W-2, or is it, hey, January 10th and my W-2 is already available in my app that I can go, get my tax refund quicker? Those kind of things have been critical for our employees to be able to interact better with the organization for all of, again, that employee administration stuff that happens when you work for somebody.
Well, congratulations. That's not easy to make some of those migrations happen, but they are, like you said, really profound and powerful, especially the example you gave about AI, just helping someone through that journey of knowing what they need to know and just-in-time information that's really personalized for them, because you are working with such a large scope of individuals. So you have to make it easy for people to do it in a few clicks. That's kind of our mission too. It's something like, how can we do this in 1 click? Make it as easy as possible. I think it's so important as we grow the work that we're doing. And one of the final questions I'll bring us to is something that we ask all of the leaders who come on our podcast. And it's around our mission, open up the workforce. To us, that means a future of work that's both equitable as far as access to jobs and wealth creation. And David, we truly believe that you're doing incredible work because you're really servicing a population of new in career and youth and low income and different socioeconomic backgrounds when we think about the range and scope of the work that you do. So it's so meaningful and impactful. And we'd love to get your perspective on what you believe are the necessary steps when we think about our mission, open up the workforce.
I think there are several things that go into that. And we've talked about several of them already around setting expectations for what the job's going to be like. I'm outwardly, when you're talking about your top golf experience and being a server and your feet would hurt, your back would hurt from carrying trays. It's not easy work being in the restaurant. It's hot in the kitchen, especially in the summertime. You've been in Texas, you know what that's like. So it's uncomfortable, right? So how do you set expectations for people so they understand, hey, this can be a very rewarding job and career for you. There are certainly some unpleasant things, but as I like to argue with people all the time, there are unpleasant things in every single job. There are parts of my job that, although I feel I've been successful for 20 plus years, there are parts of my job I don't like to do. But it just comes with the territory. It's part of being employed anywhere or doing any sort of thing. There's things that come up like that. So how do you set those expectations for folks? How do you make them understand, hey, this is what's going to happen. Let's talk through this and make sure this is going to be right for you, because this isn't right for everybody. I think another part of it is really removing that stigma around restaurant operations. There is just a classic joke that's been around forever about, hey, if you don't get a degree, you're going to be saying, do you want fries with that forever thing? And it's amazing to me that there are so many people that don't realize the opportunities available in the restaurant world. Again, as a general manager, you run a $1 to $7 million business with lots of employees that report directly to you. You're a leader in our organization. There are a lot of startups that would love to get to $1 to $7 million a year in annual revenue. And so it's one of those things that's very doable. The restaurant industry provides those opportunities for people. Again, there's always growth. Even in times when the economy is not as great as it could be, people go out to eat. It's a shared experience that we all have of loving to go to a restaurant, whether it's a nice restaurant when we've got money or whether it's Taco Bell if we're pinching pennies. And so it's not quite recession proof, but it's close. So, I mean, it's simple business to be in. And then really communicating those opportunities to folks. Again, the stories we have, there are so many people I could list by name that started out as team members of our organization and now are doing phenomenal things as multi-unit managers and vice presidents. We've had people that have worked in the restaurant and gotten their degree, and now they work in our accounting department in our office. We have HR folks that have come from operations backgrounds and done that. So there's so many ways people can come in with a GED or high school education in some cases. In our organization, we offer free GEDs to folks that may not have one, so they can get that under their belt and help them go. But you don't have to go to college to get the sort of experience that you have in the restaurant. We have had general managers that have made $100,000 in a year with salary and bonus. And so when you talk about wealth creation and you think about someone with a high school education that started with a company when they were 16 as a part-time job and is now making $100,000 a year, give or take, that's a phenomenal success story to talk about. And it happens every day in the restaurant industry around the country and likely around the world. We're not international, so I can't say that for sure, but it's just those opportunities that come out there. So I grew up from operations and now running the HR and people functions for one of the largest franchisees in the country. So there are so many opportunities available and people just have to give them a chance. And yes, like being a server at Topgolf, it can be hard sometimes and your body will ache after a long shift or after you had to pull a double because somebody called off. Those things happen. But at the end of the day, it's a phenomenal opportunity and a phenomenal way for people to grow themselves and for their families. One of the things we like to talk about is we have 12,500 people. That likely means we're impacting between 30 and 40,000 people's lives when you think about the families of those employees that are working for us. And so we want to do everything we can every day to make sure, how do we make sure 30 to 40,000 people in our care are taken care of and are doing the best they can do.
And for our listeners, I think you can understand why we were so excited to have David on this podcast to share the work that you've been doing. Because when we think about open up the workforce, we really look at the work that you're doing. And you painted such a powerful picture for everyone to listen and to understand the scope of, like you said, from someone going part-time to having over $100,000 in salary. There are very few realms and pathways that enable people to do that. And you painted a very clear picture and a way for us to really visualize that. So we appreciate your work so much, David. It's been an honor to hear your story, the impact that you're having, and I hope that our listeners can take some of these learnings and implement them in the work they're doing as well. David, is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up today?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you and your listeners. It's been fantastic. It's been a pleasure to meet you and interact and wish you and Symba luck.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, David. Great having you on.
Thank you very much.